Bill Stasek, past president from the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, and I'm welcoming you to another First Thursday event from the SCPA. We have a wonderful program tonight called The Struggle to Live. Why Florida Indian River Lagoon manatees are starving. This is a very, very important topic for those of us that live on or near the Indian River Lagoon, or frankly, anybody that's ever seen or dealt with a manatee. You know that they're amazing creatures. They were here before we were, and I suspect if we do what we can, they may be here after we're gone. But our program tonight is special, and we only have one speaker. We have a dedicated event tonight with Dr. Wanda Jones. She is a marine mammal biologist who's going to be talking about the issue of the manatees starving, the issue of how we can, or what we can do as a community, what we can do as individuals to save the manatees. Well, we know that many of you that are joining us tonight are very concerned about this, as well as the health of our Indian River Lagoon. And this should be an excellent, lively discussion. Once Dr. Jones is done with her presentation, we'll open the floor to those of you on Zoom who can join in with questions. We'll have a Q&A session at the end so that Dr. Jones can answer your questions. We have a little business to get done here at the very beginning of the program. We're going to open the floor for our audience. If you've got community announcements, we have a space for a few folks to make 1-minute community announcements. But first, I would like to hand the floor over to the president of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, Raed Al-Shaibi. Raed, you have the floor.
Thank you, Phil, and welcome everyone to our monthly event, the first Thursday of the month. We welcome everyone, and what an important program we have tonight, and just talking to certain people about this subject. It is the manatees. People look at them different ways, but this is a signature for us here in Brevard County. Not a lot of people who travel all over the world, and a lot of people don't even know what the manatee is, but we have this special beauty that we have, and we need to preserve it. And we have a great speaker tonight, so I want to welcome Doctor with us tonight, and I want to welcome everyone. But before we start, I just want to thank our Action Project Committee who keeps bringing these programs on a monthly basis. And this month program was organized by our special past president, Vicky Mpoko. And of course, Jan Moran is always there to support us with the graphics, and she's just a great team, and they put this program for us. For everyone, if you haven't been on our program or you haven't looked us up, we would encourage you to look us up on the website. We're at www.scpaflorida.com. We would love to have you join us, be a member, support us. It's only $25 a year. Very easy to join. If you'd like to just join us and just contribute, we have a lot of available resources, and we need a lot of help. Of course, anybody is welcome to be a member. Just remind you, our future program is another important subject, which is about voting, and it will be on July 7th. So looking forward to that program as well. Without further ado, I'll send it back to Phil, and let's get to get more information from Dr. Jones today.
Thank you, Raed. We really appreciate that. Thank you for your leadership, sir. We do indeed have a wonderful event tonight. But one of the things that we always like to tell people is that if you come to one of our events and you learn something, you see something, you're inspired, but if you keep it to yourself, well, really, we haven't done that much. We haven't done our job. it's really, really important for our speakers to bring an action item or two or three, something that can inspire everybody to do something, to get everybody out to do something. So Dr. Jones, I would like to remind you to please be thinking about an action item or a couple of action items that you can give our audience so that they can do something to change the community, something to help save the manatee. So please be thinking about that. For those of you that would like to do a community announcement, we ask that you raise your hand electronically. There in the Zoom program, there is, depending on whether you're on a phone or on a pad or on a laptop, there is something that says reactions. If you look for that little thing, click on the reactions, and there will be a little thing where you can raise your hand. And if you do, we'll give you 1 minute floor for community announcements. I see that we have our first Joanne Terry. Joanne, it's great to see you. And you have 1 minute. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the speaker tonight. So I just want to say I'm Joanne Terry. I'm running for United States Congress here in District 8 to replace Bill Posey. And I'm running because I believe that our partisan divide is keeping us from being able to make progress on issues that we all really need to make progress on, like the Indian River Lagoon. So thank you very much. And you can find out more about me at joanneterry.com.
Thank you so much, Joanne. And next month, we're hopefully going to be covering the issue of voting. Participation. We might be able to do a candidate forum. We're kind of working that out right now, so hopefully you'll be available if we can pull that together. But I think if we have that opportunity to bring our candidates in, it might be a wonderful opportunity. Do we have any other speakers? Anybody else with their hand raised? I don't see any, but I do see Vicky and Poco. Vicky, you have the floor, and don't forget to unmute yourself. There you go. Vicky and Poco.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Phil. I know the Moms Demand Action had wanted to announce tonight a Brevard Survivor Remembrance Ceremony. It's Sunday, June 5th at 7 p.m. at the Rockledge Civic Hub at 580 Barton Boulevard. And that's in cooperation with the Interfaith Coalition. And the moms are in Palm Bay tonight, the Palm Bay City Council meeting. They have a proclamation event reading tonight to end gun violence. And then, of course, on June 11th at 11 a.m., 4 years after Parkland shooting, the Brevard March for Our Lives will be happening Saturday, June 11th at 11 a.m. It's hosted again by our own Carly Hudson. And that's at the West Melbourne Community Park, 3000 Minton Road in Melbourne. And that's Saturday, June 11th at 11 a.m. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And by the way, for those that are on Zoom, if you go to the chat, you can see that there is there are a couple entries in there, thanks to Dr. Cardinal. The Brevard Survivor Remembrance Ceremony and the March for Our Lives event, they're both listed in the chat, so you can check on that as well. Again, those of you that are on Zoom, the chat is available. It is something to check throughout our event. Do we have any other hand raisers for community announcements? I don't see any. Again, if you want to do a community announcement, remember to look for the little reactions button, or if you're on a phone, you might just be looking for the little hamburger, like 3 little lines or 3 dots. Click on that. It should open up the reactions area where you can raise your hand, and I don't see anything else. So I think we may just proceed. You may be able to make a comment later during the Q&A at the end of the program. Well, without any further ado, I would like to take just a moment to take note of the horror that we've all been experiencing over the past couple of weeks. The number of shootings, the number of innocent people that have died is truly unacceptable. This is nothing new in America. It just seems to be getting worse. And I'd like to remind everybody that the President of the United States is going to be making a special address on this subject at the conclusion of our event tonight. So at 7:30, I believe, is about the time that they'll be airing the President's remarks live. And of course, as you may notice, we have our sunflowers here by our banner, and that's a reminder that none of us should forget what's happening in Ukraine. The horrible attack and invasion of Russia on Ukraine. We all need to remember, and if you can, try to contribute to the Red Cross or whatever charity that you have to support the victims and the people emigrating, people escaping from the attack of Russia on Ukraine. Tonight's speaker, Dr. Wanda Jones. She's a marine biologist, marine mammal biologist and conservationist. She's conducted research on manatee feeding preferences and compared the nutritional composition of lettuce, water hyacinth, and hydrilla. Rather than going on and on, I'd just like to actually let her explain what she's been doing. Most of us have been members of, or I'm not going to say most, many of us have been members of the Save the Manatee Club or other conservation organizations, other environmental organizations trying to protect our state, protect the West Indian manatee, the Serenian species that we all love so much. But Dr. Jones has some very interesting ideas, and we would like to give her the floor. So Dr. Jones, if you are ready, we welcome you to the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, and you have the floor.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who is taking the time out of their schedule to come to the presentation. I really appreciate it. And I will definitely, because I come from, I have educators in my family, and I know that talk at 7:30 is going to be very, very important. So I will definitely be very courteous of people's time. And at the same time, hopefully, be able to answer questions that maybe people have had in the back of their minds for the past, actually about almost 2 years now, in regards to the manatee crisis, and maybe even share some information that they haven't heard. Because one of the things that I've noticed is, as I have read the media stories that have come out over the past, throughout this entire crisis, I see some big gaps in there sometimes. So one of the things that I'd really like to do in my presentation tonight is to fill in some of those gaps that you all weren't even aware were gaps, actually. So is there am I able to share my screen?
Dr. Cardinal, have you worked with her on that?
Oh, what was that? Make her
to share her screen.
Okay, hold on. Let me see. I can do. There we go.
Okay.
Is that what you wanted?
We don't see it yet.
Okay.
The joys of technical difficulties.
I know, right?
Where I spotlighted her in the middle. That's what I was supposed to do, right?
Who wants to share her screen?
Yeah, I'm looking for that little.
I'm sorry. You want to share something on the screen. Oh, okay. That's totally different. I'm sorry. Okay, I think I'm sharing. I don't know what I did here. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't want it. Hold on.
You don't want to share your screen. I think you want to give her the option to share her screen.
I know,
to do that,
I know.
I believe she has to be made co-host.
Oh, I did make her co-host.
Oh, here's a little button down here, share screen.
Wait a minute.
There you go.
How do I undo this now?
Okay.
Stop share for you and make her a co-host, Nellie.
She is a co-host. Wait a minute. No. Remove spotlight. Okay. Oh, wait.
There we go. I see her screen now.
Okay. You see her screen now?
Says about the Florida manatee.
Yeah, okay.
There we go. Dr. Jones, you now are back on the floor. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks
Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks to everybody for bearing with us during this technical difficulty. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you see the about the Florida manatee?
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Is it now big?
Yes.
And that's all you see? Perfect. Okay. All right. So just to tell you a little bit, Phil did a wonderful introduction. Just wanted to share a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Wanda Jones. I am a marine mammal biologist, and I did my graduate work at the University of Florida, where I did the manatee research, looked at feeding preferences, manatee feeding preferences, and I had the opportunity to look at live manatees. What are their preferences as they make live choices? Sometimes the research is conducted using fecal material, but I had the opportunity to have the manatees actually choose what they were interested in eating. So that was one of the unique things about my study. I also worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and have worked for NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration Division, National Marine Fisheries, which is the Marine Mammal Division, after I finished my work up at the University of Florida. So marine mammals have been a large part of my life for a number of years. While I was working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I had the honor of being able to work with the group of scientists and researchers, rather elite group, that were the pioneers for all manatee research that's been done in Florida. They collaborated with other pioneers who were working at universities, but the men and women that I worked with were the ones who developed the photo ID catalog, the satellite tag program, the necropsy, salvage necropsy program. At that time they called it salvage, but now we call it the necropsy program. Pretty much everything that we know, the seagrass research, everything that we know about manatees, the group of people that I worked with were the ones who got everything started and built the foundation that other researchers are now building upon today. So I feel very honored to have had the opportunity to do my research with that group of men and women. They worked really hard, put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into working towards bringing the manatee, the Florida manatee, back from the brink of extinction, because that's why they were listed as an endangered species. And with the work that they did, along with a number of collaborators and throughout the state and university levels, they did and brought our numbers up to about 8,000 statewide. So huge amount of work that's been done. Florida manatees, as many of you know, they're a subspecies of the West Indian manatee. They can live as long as 60 years. They can get to be a pretty heavy weight, but they're the most peaceful animal you've ever met. They don't have any natural predators, thank goodness, but they also are not harmful to anybody. As a matter of fact, they are herbivores. They're the only marine herbivores that exist on the planet. They have co-evolved with seagrass for millions of years. There's fossils that researchers have found of manatees that lived millions of years ago, and through the ability to use isotope information, they have found that manatees and seagrass have evolved for millions of years, which is why the situation in the IRL is so critical in terms of needing to find a solution on how not just to help maintain the manatee population that we currently have, but to also restore their habitat so that they can continue to be present in the Indian River Lagoon and on the East Coast for many, many, hopefully, centuries to come. All right, we are the biggest threat to manatees through boat strikes, encounters with fishing equipment, canal locks, chemical pollutants, such as glyphosate, which is sprayed on plants, also aquatic plants, specifically hydrilla water hyacinth, in order to rid waterways of them. But those two plants also happen to be two very important food items for manatees. You all, those of you who live in Brevard County, are familiar with the many issues that have been occurring over the years with the algae blooms and red tide. And that has been exacerbated by the chemical pollutants that have been used in urban and agricultural areas. So between red tide and algae blooms, the seagrass within the Indian River Lagoon, there used to be, for those of you who may have lived here for many years, you all used to see these beautiful seagrass meadows in the IRL, and that was the primary food, not just for manatees, but also for sea turtles, as nursery area for fish. A large number of animals depended upon that, and the fishing economy, both commercial and recreational fishing economy, also depended upon those seagrass meadows. But as a result of nitrogen overload, specifically coming from septic tanks in the wastewater plant over in Titusville, dumping waste sewage basically into the northern Indian River Lagoon, that has led to a number of events that had a domino effect that led to the seagrass dying. So you have high nitrogen, you wind up getting algae blooms. Algae blooms shade out the seagrass below. They can't get the sunlight they need, they die. When the algae dies, it sinks to the bottom, creates muck, and then that leads to additional problems because your seagrass will have difficulty growing back at that point. And then when this keeps happening, you have multiple algae blooms. And what we are seeing now is, as a result of multiple algae blooms, we have lost the seagrass meadows in the northern Indian River Lagoon, which were critical habitat. And this has been cited by researchers, those meadows were critical habitat for the manatees in Brevard County. And we're seeing the result because of the fact that those seagrass meadows are no longer there. We're now seeing the impact of that. And so what we have seen over the past 2 years, it's what's called an unusual mortality event, was finally declared in the spring of 2021 because we lost 372 manatees approximately in the fall of 2020, winter 2021, which was unprecedented because it was all happening in one area. And I looked at the necropsy reports from the manatees for the year of 2021, and the majority of those manatees died from starvation. That's not something that has been denied. The FWC has been very honest about the fact that, and the FWC, I apologize, I use acronyms, the Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission, FWC for short, has been honest about that. Is their findings also. The manatees starved to death, primarily because they did not have the food that they did not have the seagrass available to them during the winter at the time when they were at the power plant staying warm. I'll talk a little bit about that. And so as a result, you had 372 manatees die. And then this year we had over 350 manatees die. Now, one thing I want to clarify is those are the ones that were actually counted. There were manatees that died that nobody knows that they died. And so those animals go uncounted. So you always have to add a few more numbers in. The numbers that the FWC posts on the internet, you need to add maybe 50. In the first year, maybe an additional 100. And then this year, the FWC was more vigilant in trying to get to the carcasses and get the manatees and out of the water. And so maybe this year there were an additional 75 that nobody knew about. It could be more than that. Bottom line is the Brevard County manatee population, the residents, and many people don't quite understand the difference between the residents and the migrants. So I'll talk about that too if I talk about the cold weather factor. But there were approximately 1,100 resident manatees, and of the over 700 that have died in the past 2 years, it's not known exactly how many of them were residents because the FWC did not do an aerial survey, which is what is used. They fly over and count the manatees, usually in the wintertime because that's the easiest time to count them. For 2020, they didn't do it because of COVID. 2021, it's unknown as to why they did not do an aerial survey. Typically, when you have a mortality event where you have a lot of animals that died, you want to do a survey to find out how many you have remaining. And winter 2021 would have been the time to do it, but they did not do it. So it's at this point unknown how many resident manatees are still in Brevard County, exactly how many of that population, the 1,100, are still there. Summer surveys can be done, they're just a little bit more difficult because the manatees are spread out, which leads me to explain the difference between residents and migratory. So when the manatees come, during the winter, it gets cold, and as you all know, manatees come to the Indian River Lagoon because that is their wintering place. Cold weather, manatees cannot tolerate temperatures below 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So as a result, they will go to springs on the West Coast because there are springs there that they can go that remain at a steady 70 2 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. And so the West Coast manatees have those available to them. The East Coast manatees come to the warm water discharge at the FPL power plant. And that's ever since humans built that power plant there and manatees discovered, okay, hey, this is a place I can go to be safe in the winter, then they go. If manatees are not in a warm water area when it's cold, when the temperature drops, if they are in cold water for too long, they will die as a result. So the manatees are very they have site fidelity, which means they will go to the same places. So in the winter, they come to FPL. After the weather warms back up, there's a group of manatees that stay in the Indian River, or there were a group of manatees that stayed in the Indian River Lagoon for the entire rest of the year. And that's just where they live. They would eat the seagrass there. That was their home. And then there was another group of manatees that would leave and go to travel down the East Coast to South Florida and eat seagrass there down in South Florida. And then when winter came, come back up to the Indian River Lagoon, because that's their overwintering spot. And so that's one thing I want to clarify, because a lot of people are confused about that. They thought they have been, many people believe that all of the manatees, once it gets warm, all of the manatees leave the Indian River Lagoon. That is not the case. There was or has been a resident population there for many years. There was a 10-year study done by by this time, maybe Dr. Chip Deutsch, who looked at satellite tagged manatees and followed them for 10 years, essentially. And so it is known that there is a resident population of manatees there in the northern Indian River Lagoon. They are the ones who are most severely impacted by this lack of seagrass. The other important thing to know is that even though the migratory, so we know the ones that stayed here in the Indian River Lagoon had nothing to eat, and the older ones would leave, and because they know that, okay, we can venture out. But the babies, the ones who were only 2-3 years old and had just left mom, they've only known the Indian River Lagoon. And so that the concern has been that was the largest group of the population that would have died, because they didn't know that they could leave the Indian River Lagoon. Those who were resident babies didn't know they could leave and go somewhere else to find food. So that's been a big concern. But again, without a survey being done to document how many manatees are there, both resident and migrant, then we don't have that information. The manatees that did migrate away, the problem with them is that they aren't finding enough seagrass even when they travel down south, because of all of the development. The seagrass meadows there are also dying and are in decline. So the manatees are going south, they're migrating to the south, and they're finding some food, but they're still not finding enough to help them recover from the starvation period that they were in when they were at the Indian River Lagoon in order to stay warm during the winter. So, and this has been going on for years. It wasn't just, it started happening over 2 years. For several years, the manatees have not been doing well because they haven't been getting enough food. So what we've seen in the past 2 years was just the straw breaking the camel's back, essentially. Coming back to the IRL, no food, and having to stay there for an extended period of time due to the cold winter, the manatee system just said, I can't. They just basically stopped working, because the animals were already malnourished and had been malnourished for a number of years, and then come back to the IRL these past 2 winters and no food to eat, and they just started dying. And so that's one of the important things that people need to know. Many people think the manatees would migrate away, get fat and healthy again, and then come back in the winter. That was not the case. It's been documented scientifically, and also Dr. DeWitt, who does the manatee necropsies for the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute, even she has said in a presentation that these manatees have been in poor body condition for a number of years, and that has helped. That is part of what led to their starvation. So, as you all may know, this year there was a feeding program that was instituted, and there was a feeding program that was instituted, and that feeding program was put into place by the FWC in order to try to address the issue. Now, I watched the August 8th FWC meeting in which they shared their plans for fall 2021. There had been a call from conservationists and environmental groups, including Bear Warriors United, asking them to start a feeding program. Actually, Bear Warriors United led the charge on that. They were the primary ones asking FWC, please feed, create a feeding program. Katrina Shattuck has worked, who is the executive director of that organization, has worked really hard to try to get them to do a feeding program, and they refused. And August 8th, as I listened to the plans that they were sharing about how they were going to address the upcoming winter, manatee migration, they essentially, the person who spoke, or the FWC, the representative, essentially said, well, we're going to basically focus on rescue. Well, I unfortunately wasn't able to attend that meeting. I really wish I could have, because my question to them would have been, why not just, instead of having to rescue, just provide these manatees with hydrilla and water hyacinth. We have plenty of it in lakes. As those of you who are fisher people know, it clogs the waterways. It's annoying. You can't get your boat anywhere. And so they're constantly having to remove it. It used to be mechanical harvesting. Now they're using sprays, which I'll talk about briefly in a second. And so we have a huge food source right there. Manatees recognize hydrilla and water hyacinth as their food because that's what they eat on the West Coast and when they're in other places along the East Coast. So they recognize that as food. That seems like a win-win. You mechanically harvest it out of the waterways, boaters can boat, manatees have food to eat, you save the entire IRL population because you've provided them with food that they will eat and that's nutritious for them. So why not do that? But when it was asked for them to do that, they chose not to do that. And so how do we know that hydrilla and water hyacinth is more nutritious? That was the results and findings of my study. Was I compared romaine lettuce, hydrilla and water hyacinth in terms of their nutrient composition. And hydrilla and water hyacinth was higher in fiber, and it was more nutritious essentially for the manatees than lettuce. Lettuce doesn't have any fat in it. If it did, then I promise you models and actresses would never ever just eat salad. They would never touch the stuff if lettuce actually had sufficient fat in it to help bring a malnourished organism back to health. And so lettuce just doesn't have the nutrients that are necessary. And so that's why I was asking please to feed hydrilla and water hyacinth instead of lettuce. And feed the entire group rather than focusing on rescue. If you focus on rescue, that means you've got animals that are going to be dying and some won't be in a place where they can be rescued. So focus on feeding instead. And so they instead did the feeding program where they used the lettuce. They were told that by rescue groups that wild manatees won't eat lettuce because they don't recognize it as food. But the committee that made the decision or makes the decisions about whether to feed the manatees, what to feed the manatees, chose to go ahead and use lettuce. So as you've been looking at the slide, as I've been talking, I'm sure most of you have read it, that the number of manatees aggregating there at the FPL site is, at the time that we were doing the feeding program, the animals were coming in. They came in by November. Because FWC hadn't done an aerial survey, I worked with a group of citizens and we were able to get an aerial survey of our own, very crude, but we were still able to get it. And we're able to see that there were at least 500 manatees or 400 manatees, over 400 manatees there on November 27th. So we reported that number to the FWC because we knew that they needed to really get food there, but still they drug their feet with the feeding program. So the FWC did eventually start the feeding program. They only used lettuce. I believe that their hope was that the animals, because when, based on the footage that I saw and also, actually having gone out to the site, I know that there were a number of satellite tagged manatees that were coming into FPL. I saw them in the lagoon. And so I know that they were there. Now, the thing about the satellite tagged manatees is that they are the ones who have been in captivity. They were rehabilitated manatees. When rehabilitated manatees are put back out into the wild, they put a satellite tag on them so they can keep track of them. So I believe that perhaps the decision makers were hoping that the wild manatees would follow the example of the rehabilitated manatees, just like what happens in rehab facilities where when you bring a rescued wild manatee into a rehabilitation facility, they don't eat lettuce right away. It takes them a while. They have a learning curve with that. But they see other manatees eating it, and so then they begin to eat the lettuce. I can only speculate. I don't know because I'm not privy to, in spite of the fact that I've asked, I haven't been able to get any information as to why they fed lettuce instead of hydrilla and water hyacinth. I do know that the rescue people, the people who represent rescue organizations who are on that committee, did tell the whole committee wild manatees don't eat lettuce. They have to learn to do it. So perhaps that was the idea behind just feeding them lettuce, hoping that all 400 animals would learn from the few, maybe 10 or 15 animals that were satellite tagged that recognized lettuce as food, that all 400 animals would learn from them. I don't know, but I do know that in spite of the fact that they offered the lettuce, and in spite of the fact that there were manatees that ate the lettuce, some of them, not all of them did. And that would have been your wild manatees that would have been hesitant to eat it. So the feeding program, it was great that FWC did the feeding program. It would be nice if they would, one, consider starting it again immediately for the manatees that are residents, and two, if they would feed hydrilla and water hyacinth instead of lettuce. I did have the opportunity to speak to one of the deputy directors about that, and she said, when I asked her why they fed lettuce instead of hydrilla and water hyacinth, she told me that's because in the rehabilitation facility, they eat it and they do well. I said to her at that point, well, this is true, but they also have exposure in the rehab facility. They are also given, the wild manatees brought in, are also given vitamins. They're given other produce other than lettuce that have additional nutrients and additional fiber, which is what manatees need. And they have veterinary access. They have access to veterinarians who are going to help take care of them. Wild manatees, the ones at PL who were on the feeding program, who were there to receive lettuce if they were going to eat it, didn't have that additional aid. All they had were the lettuce. And when you have animals that have been starving for 2 or 3 months and are malnourished, they need more than lettuce. So I'm hoping that in this upcoming year that they will feed them hydrilla and water hyacinth instead of lettuce. All manatees recognize both of those food items as both of those plants as food, and will eat it much more readily than they'll eat lettuce. Plus, hydrilla has a fiber content similar to seagrass, and so that will work much better with the manatee's digestive system than lettuce does. They did stop feeding the manatees in the feeding program at the end of March 30th. So that meant that the resident manatees in the IRL had nothing to eat after that. And I stay in contact with people who live there in Brevard County, and some of those people have told me that even though they've lived there for years, they're not seeing as many manatees as they have seen in the past. And there's a really strong concern that a lot of the resident manatees have passed away. But again, without a survey being done, we have no way of knowing if that's the case. This slide is the group of people that are on the committee. That, as you can see, it was a pretty large committee. My understanding is that some of these people were in favor of feeding hydrilla and water hyacinth. Others were not. I don't know, I'm not privy to how the meetings went, how the decisions were made. I've asked, is it a majority of people who, did they just go with what the majority said? But I was never able to get a satisfactory answer on that. But as you can see, they at least did fill the committee with people from a number of different agencies, both state and federal. Still, in the end, even though the feeding program was successful to a degree, the number of animals that continued to die even after that was still, in my opinion, heartbreaking. Essentially, there were 4 to 10 dead manatees that were pulled out of the Brevard County Indian River every day. This was
It looks like we may have lost Dr. Jones' signal for a moment, so please hang with us, everybody. Dr. Jones, I don't know if you can hear us, but she's locked up. We do, I have been noticing several people asking questions in the chat area here on our Facebook, or on, excuse me, on our Zoom page. And those that have been asking questions, if you can be patient, Dr. Jones will be able to directly answer your questions. It looks like we have, well, we've still got her locked up. This is an internet issue, and hopefully she'll be able to reconnect to us momentarily. I can actually answer a couple of these questions myself. I had the opportunity to go out personally on a kayak and see a particular area where the FWC was dumping manatee carcasses last summer. In fact, my wife and I went over there to see it ourselves, to witness it. We saw about 30 carcasses just to the northwest of the Manatee Cove Park. It's on Merritt Island, on northern Merritt Island. We photographed that, and many of the pictures that you've seen in Florida today on Yahoo News, on the local media, actually came from that expedition as we captured that information. It was a horrific sight. I've been kayaking out the Indian River Lagoon and interacting with manatees for 25 years, and it was one of the worst things I've ever seen. The reason that the manatee carcasses were in that location is that FWC and the other agencies that ordinarily take care of this, SeaWorld, that kind of thing, they were overwhelmed. They just did not have the capability to pull the animals out and do necropsies on them. And so they were just dragging the ashore and leaving them on the beach and letting them rot. The vultures were on them, doing what vultures do. And unfortunately, to this very day, those bones are out there sitting on the shore, somewhat underwater. So I can personally tell you, if you have any doubt that this is a real thing, I've seen it personally. And as we hope that Dr. Jones will come back, I know that there were some questions about what would happen if we shut off the water heating from the Indian River Lagoon. Warm spots like the one that she's describing that FPL operates in Titusville. And I believe that the FWC's been very hesitant to allow that. In fact, they're requiring FPL to continue to provide some warm water in the winter because these animals have grown up and learned, been trained essentially to go there in the winter for their food. It's not the only place. It's very important to understand this is not the only place that manatees go in the winter for warm water. The Manatee Cove Park off of Tropical Trail is another safe haven for them, where the water's warmer in that location. Those of you that live near Patrick Air Force Base, there is a large canal that's just south of Patrick that manatees cluster in large numbers in the winter, for whatever reason. But there are other places like that, some that are lesser known, where manatees can find a safe haven in the wintertime. Manatees also go out into the ocean. If you've never seen them out there, they definitely, groups of manatees work their way up and down the Florida coast out in the salt water of the ocean out there. And so they do migrate around. They do move around sometimes pretty good distances. And as she mentioned, of course, there are different populations, different groupings of them. Many of us are familiar with the manatees over in Crystal River, over on the West Coast, other places that, areas where there's springs, where spring water comes up out of the ground, and all year round, it's pretty much about 72 degrees. And they're found around springs where they can find warm water, and they don't die from hypothermia. That's the reason the manatees, just like us, if you immerse yourself in water, even relatively warm water, the heat from your body leaches away. It's a problem that all mammals have. And I'm not certain if Dr. Jones has come back to join us yet. Has anybody seen her coming into the?
Phil,
Go ahead,
I don't know.
Ryan.
Yeah, just want to. I know you've been also communicating with Phil, with Tony Sasso from Indian River Lagoon, and I also spoke to him. Is there anything also, because there's a lot of legislative action items that needs to be done? Can you touch on your discussion with him, or if I don't know if you have any more details about what he's looking for and the support that the Indian River Lagoon needs as well, because it's all connected.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that, Ryan. Tony Sasso, of course, good friend of this organization, former state representative for our area. He also was part of the team that developed the eels program for the Cocoa Beach area for the Thousand Islands. He was the former head of Keep Brevard Beautiful. And today he's on the board at the Indian River Lagoon Coalition. Tony has worked very hard over the years, as have many people, to try to pass legislation to support the manatees, to provide habitat support, and to basically, one of the most important things is to clean the Indian River Lagoon. The Marine Resources Council, of course, is another local organization working with many other environmental groups to try to work to clean the water. The reason that this is happening, as she mentioned, and that is that when the water in the Indian River Lagoon gets cloudy, the cloudiness, or they call it turbidity of the water, when the water gets green or when the water turns brown, the sunlight can't penetrate that. And the plants that normally live on the bottom need sunlight to live. And they just get snuffed out because there's no light. It would be if you took a plant and threw a blanket over it. So when we have these algal blooms, and the algal blooms are, of course, the result of many different things, but primarily excessive fertilizer, excessive nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, etc., in the water, and the constituent algae, forms excessively, and it blanks out the water. So what we tried to do is to pass legislation to get money to help clean up the lagoon. Everybody here in Brevard County pays an extra half-cent sales tax in our county as part of a county-wide effort to clean the lagoon and to mitigate the formation of this algae in the water. One of the priority parts of that is to clean the pudding-like substance that's on the bottom of the lagoon. It floats around on the sandy bottom of the Indian River Lagoon, and just again like a blanket. If it goes over a seagrass bed, snuffs it out, kills it, and it also preserves those nutrients in the water, which essentially feeds the algae. It's a very bad situation. I see we actually have a couple other questions, a couple hands raised. Why don't we bring everybody into the discussion right now while we wait for Dr. Jones to get reconnected. Larry Abdullah, you have a question or a comment. What do you have?
Yeah,
Larry?
well, I'm fascinated about her idea of water hyacinth hydrilla, and but what I was going to ask her, I hope she can make it back. In the first place, of course, having canoed in freshwater and lakes, that's where we see that. I don't even think it grows in salt water. That's my understanding anyway. So what is, and maybe no one here can answer this, but I was trying to understand the availability, if the employees would have to go gather it in those places. Maybe perhaps they could farm it, and that might even be a better way. It probably would not be that difficult to farm it. So that was the kind of question as far as how they would gather the hydrilla or water hyacinth and the availability versus lettuce.
Well, Larry, I can tell you that there's an overabundance of these aquatic plants. And so there's no reason to farm because we have way too much to deal with. I see we have Lou Kontnick, who's got his hand raised, and Lou probably could pick this up. I think Lou's on the Indian River Lagoon Coalition and probably has some experience of this. I believe the city of Satellite Beach has a mechanical collector. I believe they've purchased one and they have it available to do that. So Lou, maybe you've got some insight on that. Lou, can you take yourself off mute and join the discussion?
I think I'm off mute. Do you hear me?
There you go. We got you.
Okay, great. Well, first, I want to say thank you. I think this is an excellent program. And yeah, I'm on the Indian River Lagoon Coalition board, and Tony Sasso, as you referred, joined that not too long ago. So I'll mention a few things about that, and then also, well, maybe I'll start with the harvesting, and that is that I'm not an expert on this at all, but I know that the Sorrel Plan has financed the acquisition of harvesting devices for, it's got to be 3, maybe 4, and there probably will be more different localities. So there is, some movement, and I think there should be a lot more movement in that direction. The idea of spraying glycosates, just as tragic. In terms of the comment that one of your people asked about Tony Sasso and the legislative action, is that I've been working with Tony within the coalition over the last couple of months to put together a nonpartisan citizen advocacy group that will, where possible, encourage or thank our leaders, our politicians, for doing the right thing, and where they're not doing the right thing, make clear, through tens, hundreds, maybe even, let's shoot ultimately for thousands of our residents to go ahead and call, write, and so on. And so this activity is called the Lagoon Voices. And people who are interested in it can go to helpthelagoon.org/voices, helpthelagoon.org/voices. And Tony, when you go there, you'll see that Tony is doing some training to people about what is advocacy, how do you do that. There's a little bit of information about the problem, the fact that we do know a lot about it. We are making some progress, but there's more progress to be made. So with that, I'll say once again, thank you. I think this is a very useful and important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. I'll tell you what, Lou, for those of you that don't know Lou, he's been involved in this topic for many years and worked very, very hard, as with many other folks in our community, working to protect our Indian River Lagoon. We've had numerous programs over the years. Defending our environment, defending the Indian River Lagoon is one of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance's key missions. We've brought many voices onto the air, into our meetings. And Lou, we've certainly appreciate all that you've done over the years. We have several hands that are up. We just had Larry already. Vicky, your hand is up. Would you like to ask a question or make a statement, join the conversation?
I just wanted to say one of the excuses that were given about feeding the hydrilla, they were worried that because it's an invasive plant, it would take over, but it does not survive in brackish water. So that's a lame excuse. And I think we should be doing more of this and feeding them the natural food rather than spraying all this poison into our waterways. So that's what the Stop the Spray is about on her PowerPoint. And that's a great group to look up when you get off of here. That's all I wanted to say.
I think that was Stop the Starve is what
Stop
it is.
the Starve. And
Starve.
Stop the Spray also.
Ah, okay. Well, when we, as humans, whenever we intervene in a natural ecological system, there are always unintended consequences. And so the idea of trying to kill weeds with herbicides might achieve your initial goals, but the downstream consequences, I don't think it takes a lot of imagination to say this is not a good thing. So the great news is that we're here discussing it. The great news is that good minds are working to try to solve this problem. Ed, our president, do you have a comment, question?
Yeah, just want to follow up on Lou, because since Lou is on and he's working with Tony, going through the discussion with Tony about this issue and how the government, the Florida governor is handling this issue, and the appropriation funds, the fund, the appropriation of all the funds that's coming in. There's some plans that's being built to help solve this issue, and Tony had asked that to ask people to call to veto there's a 2508 is the bill that they're trying to veto. So I don't know if he can just get more details on it, to just share more information. So people, when they call, I mean, they can just say, you know, we want to veto this, and we trust Tony. But if he can add any more on the subject of funding, where is it going to go and how it's going to help, if he knows.
Lou, you've got the floor.
Okay, thanks an awful lot, and good to meet you. The way the Lagoon Voices works is that we do campaigns. And the campaign that's up right now, and I'll put the campaign URL in the chat. The campaign that we have up right now is an ask of the community to write or call the governor on several issues. And the issue you're talking about is SB 2508, which was a bill that was slipped in essentially by the sugar industry that goes ahead and disrupts a lot of the progress that we've made on Lake O and maintaining water, so we're not, water levels, so we're not bleeding it out, into the east and the west coasts. The bill was improved somewhat, but it still has some real problems. And so I'll go ahead and put, a link to that. The other things that we are currently pushing on that current campaign is some appropriations that are for the lagoon restoration here in Brevard. And so on that campaign site, it encourages people to call. It gives the basic information, and anybody can get in touch with me to find out more.
We are running out of time. We've got enough space for about 2 questions. We've got several questions that have been waiting in the chat. And Lou, maybe you can even help me with this. Let's just really see if we can quickly handle this fast as we run down the line. I see Rhonda has asked, she's asked several different questions. We're going to call on her momentarily, but we can look at her questions quickly. And that would be that if we were to cut off the manatees from the warm water discharge from the FPL plant, what would happen? I think I can take a swing at that, or Lou, you probably have it.
I don't have a lot of special insight, but I think there is a learned sort of location or home aspect with the manatees, and so I don't know that they would migrate and return to what they maybe more naturally did. So I think we've got 2 big problems. One is the warm water dilemma, and the fact that we've created natives here. And the second thing is the absence of seagrass and the inherent conflict that we're going to have, which is when you get, and I've seen this happen, where you get the beginning of the seagrass starting to come back in the spring. Well, it gets eaten as soon as it comes up, because the manatees are starving. And so we've got 2 things that we both want to protect, and their intention. It's a dilemma that we're going to have to solve.
I'm going to actually take this one last question from Rhonda. Bonnie, please excuse me, ma'am, but I'm going to go right to Rhonda since she's been asking so many questions. And again, we just have literally seconds left. So we're going to have to ask Rhonda to ask her question quickly. Hopefully, Lou and I can answer a couple quick questions, and then we've got to wind it down. I'm going to ask Rhonda if you can unmute yourself. And we can.
Yeah, actually, I have. Thank you so much. I have more of a comment than a question. There seems to be a quasi-regulatory body called the Manatee Forum that meets twice a year in the spring and in the fall. And it's a combination of agency folks, Fish and Wildlife, FWC, DEP, the power companies, and other stakeholders, including some environmental groups. And one of the reasons they didn't start feeding them until December last year was because they didn't meet and talk about feeding them until November. Now, they just met, I think 2 weeks ago, and they're not scheduled to meet again until November. So no decisions will be made regarding feeding probably until that November meeting again. So that could be a problem. And I would advocate for you guys, for everybody, all of us, to contact our representatives and our agency folks to insist that they make some decisions a little bit earlier this year to prevent further starvation And thank you for doing this. This is a wonderful meeting.
Thank you, Rhonda. And again, you've probably just given us a great action item, and that would be for everyone that's here tonight. Please look up the phone number for your state representative, for your state senator, and for the governor, for our senators, and demand that they take immediate action to support the Florida manatee. There are so many things that can be done for want of money, for want of effort. Our government literally over the past several years has starved our Department of Environmental Protection to death. They have shrunken this organization, which should be much larger and stronger, into just a hollow shell of what it should be. That's my personal opinion, but I think that should be supported by just about everybody on this screen. If you know what the DEP could do, or what FWC could do, or what our government could do, and they're not doing it. So anyway, we are literally winding down tonight. I am very, very sorry that we lost Dr. Jones. Not exactly sure what happened, but we weren't even able to reach her by phone. So something happened there. Hope she's okay. I want to thank all of you that have joined us tonight. This is such an important topic, and we will probably pick this up again if we can't do it later in the year, certainly within the coming year. But it's important to support the Marine Resources Council. It is important to support the Indian River Lagoon Coalition. The Indian River Lagoon Coalition Lagoon Voices program is definitely worth looking into. If you have any interest in this, you can become a member, a joint. They have 3 different levels of involvement. You could be very simple member. You could be very, very involved member. But the Indian River Lagoon Coalition, Lou, can you give us the URL for that?
Sure. It's in the chat, and just go to the chat and copy it. But it's helpthelagoon.org/voices. And thank you very much. Yes.
You're welcome. So everybody, again, next month, the first Thursday is going to be about voting candidate issues. We're going to welcome all of you back on the 7th of July. And we look forward to seeing you then. I know that the president is now speaking, so I would encourage you to all to check that out. Hopefully we can do something about guns, the scourge of gun violence in our country. Thanks, everybody. Have a beautiful evening. Those that are on the Action Projects Committee, we ask that you stay on the Zoom with us tonight.